We are starting with Victim Nation. Victim Nation is what I like to call it because this is what we have become. Everyone wants to be a victim because you feel like it's unfair that somebody else gets to be a victim more than you. What am I talking about? I'm talking about a bunch of Republican activists, some wearing Make America Great hats, and they were kicked out of a Davanni's on Saturday. And what happened is they wanted justice, right? Because you're mad. If you get kicked out of a place, you're mad. And I get that. The response to this has been absolutely mind-boggling to me. As the people who scream loudest about the left-wing snowflakes became the biggest snowflakes on earth because they were kicked out of a restaurant. Now, Davanni's apologized. So let me back up and try to make some sense out of this as you share your reaction at 651-461-9226. So Davanni's apologizes and says, our team in Edina misunderstood a policy around fundraising efforts in our party rooms, which resulted in an incident that impacted value guests. We're deeply sorry for the actions taken. So this group of about 20 Republicans were kicked out of a Davanni's. They had paid. They were sitting in a party room, but it wasn't organized. They just went there to eat. And so they were kicked out. Now, were they kicked out because someone was offended that they were wearing MAGA hats? I don't think so. Maybe they were. Maybe they weren't. Maybe they were kicked out because Davanni's has a policy against having political events in their party rooms. And someone was trying to enforce the policy. And she screwed up. Right now, a search on Twitter has more than 100 results of people calling for a boycott of Davanni's. Because people are out of their mind. Now, if you were one of the 20 people who were kicked out, you have absolutely every right in the world to be upset. Saturday. And there was a time in this country that when we got on the wrong end of some corporate policy, that we would escalate it to the corporate office. Because this happened on Saturday, maybe it would mean you would wait till Monday, but not in Victim Nation. In Victim Nation, you run right to social media and scream about how you were the victims of bias. You got picked on because of your red MAGA hat. Now, do I think there are people who work in restaurants, especially in the metro area, that are not exactly aligned with the Make America Great hat? Absolutely. Absolutely. Do I think that's what happened here? I don't know. Do I think it's worth calling for a boycott of a business that's been in the Twin Cities for 50 years based on people absolutely overreacting and going straight to the freak out level? Well, that's what irritates me. It's this desire to be the victim. It's this desire to have other people tell you, that's right. That's right. We listen to the lefties whine all the time about how they're the victims of discrimination. Well, now it's my time. I'm going to whine. It's so childish. And frankly, I think it is destructive to local businesses. And I think none of the people taking part in this, they don't care because they have a punching bag, they have a piñata, and they get to have all these nincompoops online tell them how right they are. And it feels good. And in the meantime, you're calling for a boycott of a pizza place based on one employee at one restaurant. It's absolutely absurd. Absolutely absurd. And I don't know how we rein this in. This idea that I'm the victim, and we're in like peak moment of people on the right claiming to be the victim when they have the president, they have the number one news network on television. And the texture, you guys, you just give and give and give. Because the first text has already come in to make the next point that Dan and I wanted to talk about. Would I think it childish if they were of a minority race and got kicked out? Do you think it is the same? Do you think it's the same being kicked out? This is a question I wanted to ask you guys. 651-461-9226. Is it the same if you get kicked out of a restaurant for wearing a Trump t-shirt or a MAGA hat as it would be to get kicked out for being a minority? Do you really think that's the same? I'd love to hear that explanation at 651-461-9226. On Facebook, Mike referring to me, this clown is such a loser. No wonder WCCO has so few listeners. I guess when you're owned by George Soros, you do hire weirdos like this. Mike, thank you for watching. I would like everyone to boycott Mike Vadnais now. Let's boycott him. Like, I don't know. Fine, that's fine. Why do we always go to boycott? Got to boycott the company. Boycott Davanni's. Let's take down Davanni's. In the outrage of the day, people lose their minds. They're chasing the daily outrage. They're chasing the little juice you get when all the random people online are like, you're right, you're right, you're right. We are being victimized. Why does everybody want to be a victim? Let me tell you something that's nice, not being a victim. I don't feel like I get victimized because of my race, because of my gender. A lot of white guys out there really want to jump on the victim train. I just don't understand it. Dan, let's break. I want to hear your thoughts on that. Lots of tech. Oh, Blois is on the line. Let's go. Blois Olson and I were talking about this earlier today because I know Blois worked at Davanni's. I got a little fired up there, Blois. I want to hear your thoughts because you work there, you know this company, and you also know the daily outrage cycle that we sort of live in.
Yeah, good afternoon, Jason. Look, I looked at this yesterday when it came across. I was like, I'm not going to engage. And then a couple of people who knew that my first job at age 14 was at Davanni. And in Davanni's, their values, here, work hard, and have fun. And to this day, I say those things out loud in work environments, to my kids, etc. And so Davanni's is going to be 50 years old. They're not a client of mine. I have no economic affiliation with them. But I was like, they apologized. And then the idea that the story you and I talked about, well, what if maybe this was a mandate from on top and they got caught and da-da-da-da-da. It's not only people want that juice, but they want to not trust anybody anymore. And my point is, I trust Davanni's. They taught me those values at 14 years old. They still have the values on the wall today. I was in a store, took a picture, and posted it. And if those are the simple values that they train their employees, care, work hard, and have fun, and one employee in 50 years caused a few people to have a headache, for which they apologize for, we can all take a deep breath and move on. Because there are much bigger issues, no matter what side of the aisle you're on right now, than whether or not this is, one day. This is like a 2-minute story.
That's nothing. But it's gone on and on and on. And I do think, the people who are kicked out, it is valid to be what the hell? Come on. And I do think people wearing Trump gear and MAGA hats, if you're I do think some on the left, just like some on the right have done this, but some of the left have villainized. If you're a Trump supporter, you're a racist and a bad person. So I get where people feel come on, man, I'm just supporting this candidate. Give me a break. Let me live. I do get that.
But here's the defining moment, Jason. The people that were there and their spokesperson said this morning, Davanni's handled it great. We're going to talk about it. It's time to move on. Yeah. It's the people who weren't there who are using these folks to get their other points across when the 20 people who are there are I was annoyed. It wasn't good. but Davanni's already apologized. Let's move on. That's what they told people on Channel 9 last night. That's what they told other radio hosts this morning.
Yeah.
And that's where those other people who want to channel their victimhood are like, if the aggrieved are no longer aggrieved, then you don't need to be aggrieved either.
They can't help themselves. They just they love to play that role. And I get it. Like, it feels good to say, like, I'm it's like the basketball player who whines about a foul not being called. You're like, I'm something out of my control is screwing me over. So I get why people are drawn to that. But also, like, these are the same people who have been complaining about that mindset correctly for the last, 10 years. So, like, frustrating.
Yeah. So
that's good insight though about their values. And I think
getting to their values is the key.
Yeah. Thanks, Blois. That was really good. Blois Olson with us. Keep your text coming, 651-461-9226. We're talking about the sort of kerfuffle that kicked up over the weekend. Local pizza restaurant, one outfit, one employee kicked out a bunch of Republicans. Davanni has apologized. And yet some people are still calling for a boycott. Dan, one of the things that I was thinking about in relation to this topic is sort of this trend of how we go to social justice or social media warrior right away. We don't try to solve problems offline anymore. We don't escalate the corporate office or send an email. We just go online and blow up a place. Which, man, it certainly makes me feel for the business owners today. Right? Right? Because what do you do?
Because people are human. They're going to screw up and they're going to make a mistake and stuff's going to happen.
And even when you handle it right, it sort of takes on a life of its own. You and I were talking earlier a little bit about this sort of the fact that there are people on the right in this case who, I don't know, it's easy to dismiss this as saying it's a nothing burger.
Right.
But I do think I do think there's more to this. I don't dismiss it as a nothing. I do think I think it's worth talking about, not just because it gets people fired up.
Right. I think one of the things I've tried to commit myself to, recently, to say, is when I have something to come up that I'm like, really, this is a thing, you're going to make this, is backing up for a second and saying, okay, let me put myself in their shoes and how would I react in this situation? And can I see a reason? Because people, for the most part, are good. People, for the most part, are rational. And stuff like this doesn't just happen because of herd mentality or stuff. You know what I mean? It's how does a reasonable person come to the conclusion that this is the reaction that's necessary, or this is the reaction that's. And I can understand to a degree if you're somebody of a right-wing political persuasion who is tired of hearing about victimization on the other side all the time while you're feeling like you're being ignored by the system and by the establishment. How when there's victimization on your side, you want to grab a hold of that and raise the flag and scream and holler and go, look, it's us too. It's us too. I can understand that to a degree, but I think it just lacks a ton of nuance and a ton of putting yourself in the position of those on the other side that are being victimized. Because if you asked the question earlier, is this really the same thing as if somebody was kicked out of that restaurant for being black or being Mexican or being whatever, pick your minority. And I think it's pretty clear it's not the same thing at all. That doesn't make it right, and that's the problem, is that in discussions like this, we just say, well, it's not the same thing, as though then it's okay. No, it's not okay. This was ridiculous that this decision was made. And that's why Davanni's was so quickly, acted so quickly.
They're not defending it. They're not saying this is our policy and too bad.
But this can be a bad decision without it necessarily being equated to, the no colored signs that used to be in restaurant windows and stuff like that. It's a different level. It just is. And we can acknowledge that while saying at the same time, this is ridiculous and it should never have happened.
Do I think it's the same as a minority race, says a texter? No, because there's no way that they would kick a group of minorities out of fear of retribution. I would say, there is a significant difference between hatred based on your politics. It's just different. I guess I don't know how to explain it to someone. It just seems so evident to me. If you want to make the case that, look, I'm saying all of it is bad, so I guess I don't know why people want to make this equation. Well, I know why. Because you're racist. You are racist. Sorry. Like, you may not be a racist person, but you are espousing racist policies. So is that different? I don't know. But like, if you think being kicked out of somewhere because of your hat is the same as being kicked out of somewhere because of your race, like, I don't know what to say to you. Like, I wish we wouldn't judge people on these sort of visual things in general, but come on. Come on now. Let's be serious. Let's be serious. And a lot of people are saying, like, oh, it will be the same. A lot of texters. Oh, it'd be the same if minorities were kicked out. Because you're being kicked out because of their appearance. The reason you're being kicked out for your appearance, if your appearance, well, whatever. I mean, you know what? I'm not going to bother trying to explain racism to people that want to play the racist card because you're white. Get over it. Like, there's a difference in feeling like you've been getting a raw deal because you're white over the last 20 years and hundreds of years of oppression and slavery and redlining. And like, we just don't need to pretend that all this stuff is the same because people are a bunch of delicate snowflakes out there. I am very open to opposing views on this show. I let people say what they want. I want more of us to get together and have conversations and come together. But like, be honest about it. You have to be an honest player in the conversation if you want to have a seat at the table. And a lot of this is just nonsense. Let's break before I say something else. What's wrong with people?